Hello everybody, it is your Peacekeeper coming at you with the next video in our How to Play series for the German battleship line. This is the Kaiser class of battleships. The Kaisers were built between 1911 and 1912, and there are 5 in the class. The Kaiser herself, Frederick der Grosse, not to be confused with the Tier 9 battleship in this game, Kaiserin, Prinzregent, Luitpold, and König Albert, which I believe is a premium in the premium shop. All of these ships served exclusively during World War I, and all but the König Albert fought in Jutland. And of the 4 that served at Jutland, all but the Kaiser escaped unscathed. The Kaiser was only hit twice by heavy caliber shells, but only 1 crewman was injured during the battle. The entire line of Kaisers were scuttled in Scapa Flow after World War I to prevent their capture by the British as a result of their demands for war reparations. And in general terms, the Kaiser was an improvement over the previous Nassau class in the sense that it had much better seakeeping abilities due to a stiffer hull design. It was also well known for their excellent responsiveness at the helm. Of course, the only downside to that is if you were to go full rudder over, you lose about 66% of your speed. So, maneuverability versus speed there. This is also the first line of German battleships to be powered by steam turbines, which is a significant improvement in longevity at sea in terms of fuel economy. In terms of overall design, she sports 10 12-inch guns in what we would consider to be a rather odd configuration of 1 turret, then 2 turrets, and then 2 turrets. Odd in the sense that the center 2 turrets are off the center line of the ship. In-game, they can fire a full broadside of 10 AP shells. However, in doing so, you really have to expose your broadside because this turret here has a very narrow angle of fire when you are trying to fire all 10. So practically you can only fire 8 at a time. However, if you've got plenty of time, you could fire all 10. In terms of in-game, she continues what the Nassau started in terms of being a brawling ship. She has extremely powerful guns for her tier. There are 10 of them, so they are 12-inch guns, similar to the Wyoming in that regard, except for she has 2 less guns than the Wyoming does. But she also has better armor than the Wyoming does, and that's going back to that turtleback armor scheme that we talked about with the Nassau. Also added to the list of reasons why she's an excellent brawler is because she has a lot of secondaries. There are 22 secondary gun barrels on this ship, ranging from 88mm to 150mm. And, in a really rather odd twist of events, she also has much better AA capabilities than the Wyoming does. She's also, owing to her history and her design, she is also extremely maneuverable. All those things make for an absolutely excellent brawling ship, and this was one of my favorite ships grinding up the line, so I can't really complain about that at all. Let's go over the stats. At Tier 4, she has 46,400 hit points, a boatload of armor. Her torpedo protection, her TDS, only is a 24% reduction in torpedo damage, so not a whole lot there, and that's going to be a continuing theme with the German battleship line. So if you're expecting great TDS, forget about it. As we already talked about, she does have 10 of the 12-inch guns in 5 turrets, laid out in a 1-2-2 configuration. We have a whole bunch of those secondaries mounted all over the ship, mostly in the second deck here. There are a couple in the upper portion of the deck. Her main battery firing range is 14.6 kilometers. You can see her AA gun complement there. There is a lot of relatively short range stuff, but she does have the 88mm as well. In terms of maneuverability, she has a 23-knot top speed, so a little bit faster than the Wyoming is, but not by a whole lot. 600-meter turning circle with a 13-second rudder shift time, which I believe is significantly higher than the Wyoming is. Let's go do a quick check. Nope, Wyoming is actually pretty comparable. Fascinating. In terms of concealment, she has a 13.8 kilometer detection range by sea and a 10.5 kilometer detection range by air. Let's talk about upgrades. Main armament mod 1, it's going to be a staple. And damage control systems mod 1, it's going to be a staple. You're going to see those guys all the time throughout these lines. In terms of gameplay, you know, she plays exactly like the Nassau, and honestly, all the German battleships are going to play this way, so maybe spare the breath and not have to elaborate on this every single time, but they're brawling ships. Use their maneuverability, use their speed to close the distance. She does have a considerable amount of bow armor, so use that to your advantage and close the distance with other ships. And once you've closed the distance, give them that not the full broadside, but give them 8 of your 10 guns and watch the damage numbers go up. Anyway, let's get on to that battle video. Alright, let's get to this battle video here. One of the big things to pay attention to in this battle video is going to be the middle 2 turrets. Not only their behavior, but their firing arc. Like we talked about in the port section of this, the center 2 turrets have really weird firing arcs, and as a result, it's very difficult to bring all 10 guns to bear. That being said, you want to take advantage of those moments in the battle in which enemies aren't paying attention to you, and you can take advantage of being broadside. Now, normally I wouldn't recommend ever going broadside in a battleship, especially not to other battleships, but sometimes it is advantageous to do so. Of course, it's really situational when you can and can't do that. So, use your common sense, use some good judgment there, and do that. Now, because of the ship's speed, 23 knots, you also have to treat these ships an awful lot like U.S. battleships, and I can't stress that enough. The U.S. battleship tree, all the way up until Tier 7, has really low top speed, 21 knots or 20.5 knots, or in the case of the South Carolina, only 18 knots. As a result, you really need to take your time getting places. I mean, that sounds pretty obvious, but what I'm getting at is good knowledge of a map is going to help you in the long run. For instance, on this map, the Solomon Islands, most of the action occurs either in B or in C. A is the unloved child of this entire battle. I'm lined up here to go to A just to kind of give myself a little bit of time to let the battle develop and take advantage of the situation. I can also provide support to our DDs going to Cap B, which they're already running into resistance there in the form of a Kuma and in form of another Clemson, and it looks like there's a second Clemson in that mix there. So as you can see, we're not completely abandoning the idea of going where the action is, but we're waiting to see where the battle is developing, and you can already tell that there's going to be a large number of ships going to sea. That's pretty standard for this map. Also, while we're doing this, pay attention to those gun angles as well as the turret indicators down at the turret loaded indicators down at the bottom of the screen. Here goes our first destroyer. I really thought this was going to end up being a really bad battle, but it actually ends up being a pretty good battle with, I think it's like 90,000 damage, somewhere in that range done. Also, knowing your ships is another important part of this as well. When fighting other German battleships, oftentimes it's not advantageous to shoot at the belt line, the water line. That's where, in other battleships, it is advantageous to aim there. But with the German battleships with the turtleback armor scheme, aiming there gives you a lot of hits to the water because of the way that we got a Kuma here going broadside to us. Let's try and shoot at him, but that dispersion is awful. Anyway, when you're aiming at German battleships, you want to aim just above the waterline and just above the armored belt. And that's because of that turtleback armor scheme. You're going to get a lot more normal penetrations when you do that. You're never going to get a citadel at the ranges at which these ships are effective. So with that in mind, when you come to face up against another Kaiser, another Nassau, or the Koenig after this, you really have to be conscious of where you're aiming. So make sure that you're aiming at the correct locations for the various ships. Also, because of the gun dispersion, you really do have to treat it almost like a Wyoming in that regard, and punish cruisers that go broadside to you. You have plenty of gun penetration, that's not the issue. The guns shoot relatively flat, so that's also not the issue. The issue is you really can't take advantage of ships that are either bow onto you or end onto you. There's just not enough, the dispersion's not tight enough to actually do that. As you can see, the battle is developing, and it is going, it seems like we got a lot of movement up towards C, so we've already turned ourselves, and we're headed that way. We got ourselves a Kuma that is coming back down through the middle, and he's going broadside, so we're going to check our angle here and get ourselves lined up, and look at that shot dispersion. Not perfect, but hey, double citadel and devastating strike, and down goes Kuma! We're going to continue on headed up here. We got ourselves a Kawachi, a Phoenix, and a Kaiser. All of this is going to develop into a very interesting battle here. Looks like we got another high-tier player with his camo on. Now, the Kawachi is a relatively low threat. In terms of accuracy, the Kawachi really doesn't have that great of accuracy. So I'm really not worried about it. But we do have a Phoenix that is going broadside. Not only is he going broadside, but he's slowing down. And you can tell he's slowing down by paying attention to the background and how quickly your camera moves. And as you guys play more and more at this game more and more at the upper tiers, you will notice those subtle changes. Now, I overled that by maybe a quarter of a tick mark. Had I not overled him by a quarter of a tick mark, we would have most likely seen an exploded Phoenix. However, not so much. We got ourselves a destroyer here that we definitely need our cruisers to be focusing on. I'm going to take some pot shots at him because honestly, there's not really any other good targets. That Phoenix is hard to judge what he's going to do. And we took 2,600 hit points off for an overpen. With one overpen. That hurts at these tiers. Our Kawachi is charging in, full hog, good for him. He's gonna end up facing off broad against this Kawachi there himself. Again, we've got the lucky Phoenix up there. Go ahead and take some more pot shots at him. The shots look good. Nope, he's speeding up. And you can see he's already speeding up. Still, 6,400 damage, not a bad number to take off, but that Phoenix is by far the luckiest Phoenix I have ever seen in my life. Also, because your ship does rely on secondaries for a decent amount of your damage, you want to make sure that you're selecting and focusing your secondaries on certain targets. If you're not familiar with how to do that, press and hold the control key, I believe it's the left control key by default, and then click on the target. You'll see in chat that I'm asking Betty, who is our Kuma, to focus on trying to hunt down that DD that was running around. And it looks like he's going to try and help, so that's good. I'm glad with him trying to help. We'll go ahead and point out where he was last seen at. You'll also notice we got a Kaiser coming in. Not only is he coming in, but he's coming in hot and heavy. Look at that shot dispersion. Boom! 16,319 damage in one salvo. You'll notice where all those shells impacted. Somehow RNG gave me the benefit of putting all those shells into the upper portion of the front end of that ship. This next shot, we're not going to be so lucky. And it's not because I didn't aim it well, it's just because that's RNG for you. Only 7,000 damage. We are getting in close now. We do have a Wix up here that we need to engage. I'm 99% sure he's already launched torpedoes. I know I would if I were in his shoes. I'm plenty close to it. Our secondaries are going to start opening up on him. We did select him for our secondaries to shoot at. And we are going to add some 12-inch shells to his pain. Unfortunately, this time the overpen only does 840 damage. Not enough to kill him. And we'll go ahead and we'll put a shot out on that Kawachi. 2,700 damage, not big deal. Almost managed to get through that, but we saved our repair, knowing full well that those torpedoes were incoming. And that's another aspect of battleship gameplay that I think most people really struggle with. They want to get rid of those fires as fast as possible, but when there's DDs around, you almost have to anticipate there being torpedoes and flooding. As a result, I tend to keep my repair party in reserve until such time that it's absolutely necessary. Here's the Lucky Phoenix again. You can see our secondaries are starting to get into this, and now this captain does not have the secondary manual fire control for secondaries, so this isn't, you're not seeing accuracy from that skill factoring into this. This is just battleship versus battleship brawl here. And take a pot shot at the Phoenix, sorry, not the Kuma. And 1,300 damage, 1,400 damage. Not a whole lot of damage there. I don't know why this Kaiser, excuse me, I don't know why this Kaiser isn't paying attention, but I ain't gonna complain. Our Kuma unfortunately dies, poor Betty Crocker. And it looks like this Kawachi and I are gonna get into a knife fight. Now the problem with getting into these knife fights is to do a lot of damage, you're gonna have to either overmatch the armor on it, which in this case I was able to do. The front armor on the Kawachi is not particularly thick, so I did some damage to it. If you're not familiar with the overmatch mechanic I have a really good video on that on my YouTube channel about the patch 5.12 public test bow armor changes, which got removed thankfully. With these knife fights, you can see that the guns weren't able to keep up. That is going to be a problem with a lot of ships. One other thing to avoid doing, and actually I'm kind of sort of doing it, at these low tiers, probably not as big of a deal, but at the higher tiers, you don't want to go full over rudder and try and expose all of your guns. Generally speaking, if your enemy isn't paying enough attention to you, they will do that and they will expose their broadside and you'll be able to get a lot of citadels. But, you know, this case, I made it work for me. The Kawachi has really low gun turret rotation speeds, so I'm not nearly worried about it as some other people might be, but we got ourselves a Kaiser broadside to us, waiting for that center gun to come up. And there you can see... got kind of screwed there. 3,700-ish damage. Secondary still going to town. We're up to... looks like 75 secondary hits. Oh, nope. We are all the way up to 83. And here comes the Lucky Phoenix. Can we kill him this time? Well, the Phoenix has a really soft citadel, so I hope so. Yep, there he goes. We're already up to 8,700 or 87,000 damage in this game, and this is a tier 4 fight. Not only is this a tier 4 fight, this is a tier 4 fight that had carriers. We are still very much into this game. We've still got plenty of repairs left, so we can come back into this and fight quite frequently. This Kaiser, I don't know what his deal was. He just didn't want to pay attention to me, but we'll continue to go ahead and put rounds into him. I also don't want to leave this cap because solo capping in a battleship produces a lot of XP for you. We just crossed over the 90,000 damage threshold in a tier 4 match. We are still shooting at a Kaiser. Get our guns to bear here, and again, because he's not paying attention to me, I'm going to go ahead and take advantage of that fact, and we'll shoot a full broadside at him, even with that wonky gun angle. Of course, RNGesus has other plans. Who would have thunk it? I don't know, but I'm a little irritated by that. Well, it looks like our carrier got killed there by the last remaining destroyer. It's really rather unfortunate. I'm also not going to get guns up in time to kill the Kaiser, so we'll go ahead and load HE for this destroyer and see what we can find. And this is a perfect example of the reasons why map knowledge and, for lack of a better phrase, fieldcraft for battleship play is important. Again, much like the US battleships, your low speed means that you can't really flex around the map very easily. The best way to deal with this situation is you can either pick the midpoint, which on this map is a terrible idea, or just go where the action is, and then, well, pray that the rest of your team, once you've taken care of all the enemies on that side, pray that your team can take care of everybody else on the map and get you the win. The nice part about that is that, like the US battleships, at least in the early tiers, once you're there, you're very hard to remove from that situation. I mean, look at how low my hit points had gotten during that battle, and just how much damage we had taken. We had taken a lot of damage. We were almost dead. I think at one point the lowest hit points I had was, 8 to 10,000 hit points. And we still managed to survive that. Part of that is proper angling. The ship has a lot of bow armor. The front sections of it, the lower front sections of it, have like 150 millimeters of bow armor. You're never going to get overmatched by that. So shooting at the front end of these ships, you're always going to see big bounces, which is nice. So you're almost invulnerable bow on, but you got to close those distances in order to really make these ships work. And that's why, and it continues on from the Nassau all the way till the very end to the Grosser Kurfürst at tier 10, these ships are brawlers through and through. Alright, the match finally ends. We'll get our final battle screens here. As soon as it loads, there it goes. 90,531 damage. Look, 91 secondary hits. 1,418 base XP. 10,656 damage just from secondaries alone. That's pretty impressive. And there's our credit screen. As with all the other battleships in this tree, I mean, they're fun battleships to play, and they really reward an aggressive play style. Of course, the downside to that is if you do that without any support, you are destroyer bait, and you will accept torpedoes religiously. So you always have to be very vigilant with these ships. But it is a great ship line, and I'm enjoying doing these videos. It's very easy to do well in these ships. So with that concludes the Kaiser. Now, next video will be the Koenig, and as with always, guys, like, comment, and subscribe, and thank you guys for watching.